This is the only wheel, in my opinion, that absolutely competes with Gotway in terms of performance. Now remember, Kingsong is not a performance company. Okay? They don't work on that's not their focus. But this was a great entry into that, you know? It wasn't ambitious. It wasn't something that said, hey, we're gonna take over the world. How is everybody doing? Hope you're doing great. Now, so I just got out of work and I just want to sit here and think. I was just thinking about Kingsong, and just the direction in which Kingsong is going in general. And I never really gave much thought to Kingsong, guys. I really haven't. First, I hope everybody's doing great. Let's start with the fact that they responded, so that's good. They did respond to the event, which is expected because it's Kingsong. Kingsong is known as a great, reliable, safe company. I always like to put Kingsong and InMotion in the same category. They're both responsible. They both seem to care. You know what I mean? And they're very bureaucratic. They definitely come off like red tape companies, which in a way is a good thing, in a way is a bad thing. It's a good thing because it means that you're following the rules, you're caring about your customers, and you really care about your reputation. You know what I mean? It's a bad thing because they're bureaucratic, it takes them a long time to make decisions. You know what I mean? And sometimes those decisions end up being hidden behind a lot of red tape. And also, because they're trying to meet expectations that they've set for themselves, I feel like they can't mess up. Whereas people like Gotway, they're a company too, but you can definitely feel that they're not very bureaucratic, or you don't get the feeling from them that they're held up because of red tape or anything like that. So, which leads me to this type of talk right now, because I'm realizing before the S18, there wasn't really much to worry about in terms of safety where Kingsong is concerned. In fact, if you think about it, the S18 pretty much, if you look at it closely, that wheel kind of gave us a view into where Kingsong was headed. And it's not good. The wheel came out good. The wheel came out a hit, really. But for the most part, it kind of gave us, looking back, that is, an idea of where Kingsong was headed. And what I took from the S18 was that the design was just unbelievably beautiful. Like, there was no other EUC that was radical in terms of design like that. Like, no other EUC on the market at the time, like zero. And what I found interesting is that when I got up close with it, when I started playing with it, I realized that there were certain compromises that they had to make, or I wouldn't say that they had to make, that they made. And one of that being the shell. The shell, the encasing of the wheel was definitely something that they compromised on. It was very, very plasticky, very weak, if you will. The battery, I believe it was 1100 watt hours. That is unbelievable to me because you're pretty much stepping back. The 16X was 1550, let's just say 1600 watt hours. And that motor, I believe it was 2000 or something like that. I think it was 2200 watt motor or something like that. But either way, it was a very good wheel to start from and build up toward, or use as a baseline for something greater. But instead, what we saw was something different. We saw that Kingsong went in the opposite direction where safety is concerned. Now, safety doesn't always mean little things like LED lights or anything like that. It's literally the entire wheel, in my opinion. You have the LED lights, you have the speaker, you have the motor size, the battery ratio, all that stuff matters. But what we saw with the S18 was that they dialed all of it back to prove a point. To prove a point that, listen, we're going in a new direction, and that direction is going to be in the realm of, suspension, full on suspension. which we all loved. And I don't own an S18. I did plan on owning one, but then when I saw the 1100 watt hours, I was like, holy smokes, that's too little. Because I do like to torque. I like to torque wheels. So I couldn't imagine me riding that wheel safely. You know what I mean? So, but a lot of people loved it. That's what was amazing, because again, Kingsong being a safe company, you know, people knew that's not something they had to worry about. And I think a lot of people gave Kingsong a break on the power because that's not what they're known for either. You know what I mean? What I liked about the cutting out of the S18 was before you cut out, it would give you a beep. It would beep at you, letting you know, hey, you're over torquing. You know what I mean? Like I said, I haven't had the wheel for a long time, so I don't know if it does that all the time, but it definitely did it for me, and it did it for another guy on demo day. So yeah, so they definitely scaled back in terms of safety in that area where battery was concerned, LED lights, etc. So which leads me to this wheel right here, okay? Which leads me to this particular wheel. This is the 16X we're looking at right here, okay? So this is probably, in my opinion, the absolute best that Kingsong had to offer before the S18. This is absolutely beautiful, okay? This wheel, in case you've never had an experience with the 16X, this is probably the best wheel that Kingsong had to offer in that time, okay, during that time that they released this. So Gotway was going in a direction that Kingsong just was not able to keep up with. You had the MSP, you know, you had all these things, but one thing that you never had was a tire as big as this. You know what I mean? The S18, the 18XL, I believe, and the 18L were good wheels. Don't get me wrong, a lot of people did use these wheels for off-roading. And they were very, I mean, some people say they were durable, some say they weren't. But in my opinion, you know, the 18XL and the 18L were very good wheels, okay, from Kingsong. I rode them. I wasn't too impressed with the 18L, but the 18XL was a step up. Now, when they switched to this form factor to add more batteries, because that was really the main issue back then. They were building these round wheels, and there was only so much battery they could put in those wheels, you know what I mean? In order to step into a new territory of power that they probably wanted to all along. But the circular design just didn't make sense, okay? Even InMotion had issues with that. Look at the V10F, for example. You know, it's a very expensive wheel with very little watt hours. So that the circular form factor just phased out, okay? So yeah, the circular form factor didn't make sense after a while. It's just fascinating how technology progresses over time, because, you know, for a while it was circular, except for Gotway. Gotway, they experimented with all kinds of designs. You know what I mean? You had the Tesla with the egg shape, you had the MCM, you had the ACM, you had the MSX, you know, so many types of form factors. So, you know, this, and again, this is the what I was trying to say with them not being held back by any red tape. They could just experiment and do whatever they want. But in a way, it's a bad thing too, because then you have the safety issue. So now you're asking yourself, interesting. They went from that, the 16X, beautiful wheel, proves the point that we can, you know, create great wheels with great battery power, great tire, great form factor. And they were heading in the right direction, in my opinion. A lot of people were saying, why wasn't the 16X, you know, equipped with more speed, you know? A lot of us didn't like the throttling. In case you don't know what that means, is a 50%. At 50%, they would reduce the power. So the top speed of this is 30 miles an hour, maybe 31, I don't know. But, you know, once you reach 50% battery, the software or the firmware starts, or software, I don't know which one. I think it might be the firmware. But either way, it dials back the power so that you're not able to access the full torque, the full speed. And again, that's a safety thing. That's fine. And I think they even listened to our complaints, and what they did eventually was upgrade the firmware. Okay, so they updated the firmware and they said, hey, if you want to access some more of that power below 50%, download this firmware. And that helped too. And a lot of people were satisfied. So this, even today, is a very solid wheel, okay? The 16X, even today, is a very solid wheel. But what I don't understand is, it's like they learned nothing. Why didn't they go from this to the S18 and then use this as the platform, use this as the example of how to move forward? You know what I mean? Because honestly, this is the only wheel, this is the only wheel, in my opinion, that absolutely competes with Gotway in terms of performance. Now remember, Kingsong is not a performance company, okay? They don't work on, that's not their focus. But this was a great entry into that, you know? It wasn't ambitious. It wasn't something that said, hey, we're gonna take over the world, we're gonna take over the market. No, it had everything you needed. It had the lights, it had the handle. Now the only thing I don't like is this handle right here. Here's why I don't like it. So when you first get the wheel, it's cool, but here's what happens. You see, over time, this shakes. Okay, it feels very brittle. And see, when you push this button, this part over there lifts up, but then this part gets stuck. So you really have to push it down all the way, and then pull it up vertically in order to really get it to come up. Another thing that happens with this is, if you're not too careful, I heard you can turn it off, but the cutoff, I don't know if this is the reason, but sometimes this thing just cuts out on you. That's while you're pushing it, not riding. I haven't experienced any random cutouts while riding, but while pushing, this tends to cut out, and I think it's because of this mechanism. Because what happens is, when you pull this up, if you're not aware, this beep means that it's a lift switch cutoff, so that the wheel does not spin out of control. And that was a good implementation. You know what I mean? Very good implementation. But over time, you can see how that can affect the performance of that method. Okay, so yeah. So then they went from the S18, which lacked power, which lacked a lot of things that this 16X had, and then they jumped straight to the S20. You know, and which is fine. The S20 is not a bad wheel, guys. It's really not. It's just that one incident that happened, which they should absolutely take seriously. But in the end, it's, you know, people are going to buy what they want to buy. But the point is, I just feel personally that there's a lot they could have learned with this 16X. And I don't know. It didn't seem like they learned it. The initial power, or the initial lack of power there is in the S20, you can't say the same thing for this 16X. This thing has all the power you need. It's a torque wheel. This thing is a torque wheel. And it's very satisfying to ride it. As a Gotway rider, it's very satisfying to ride these 16X. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm saying it. But when I rode the S20, it's not that it wasn't satisfying. It was very satisfying. But because they promoted it as a torque wheel, it became less satisfying. Because now you're expecting all the torque. And it's just sad that by comparison, that the torque on the 16X far outperforms that of the KS20. You know, people like EUC Service, you know, they did mention that when they upgraded the firmware for the KS20, the board was not able to handle all that load, which tells you that it's possible that a lot of the components in the KS20 came from the S18. Maybe not exactly, but it definitely felt like that to me. It felt like it was the S18 scaled up with battery and motor, but no firmware, no hardware, no hardware to match the output that would be required from, from the power they were trying to equip it with. So there were a lot of fails with the S20. But that's okay. That's okay. I don't know. The 16X I haven't heard any major complaints. I haven't heard any complaints really. And if you have heard crazy complaints about the 16X, please drop it in the comments. But I haven't. And this should have been their benchmark, in my opinion. The 16X should have been their benchmark. The S18 was a pilot wheel, in my opinion. So a lot was forgiven because, they were trying to enter a new market, a brand new one that they created, full on suspension. And honestly, in my opinion, so far, they're doing fantastic. If it wasn't for that fire, there would be no issues with Kingsong. Kingsong would be on the way up, but they're learning. They're learning and they're coming along. So I just made this video to say that the 16X should have been a baseline for how they moved forward, because now they lack safety. There are no LED lights. There's no power, and power has a lot to do with safety. I'm sorry. Safety has a lot to do with power. Okay, so if you're lacking initial power, initial torque, that translates to a lot of things. You know what I mean? So let me know what you guys think. I think they still have a lot of work to do. I think they will do it. The S20 is now the S22, renamed. Okay, the S22. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens with the new firmware. Hopefully new hardware. Hopefully they didn't have thousands of S20s in shipment or whatever. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna do a little experiment with this 16X. I don't really drive it that much. I'm gonna try to cut it out the same way I did with the S20. I don't think it'll burn, and I don't think I'll hurt the motherboard at all. I strongly feel that this wheel was built right, So, yeah. Stay tuned for that experiment. Peace out, guys.